12th day of December. I'll be your host tonight, Dana Durnford. I hope everybody's doing well, except for the nuclear industry, of course. You can call in at 709-589-4406. If you don't, who will? We're going to talk about a whole bunch of melter reactors. Reactor 1 and its two fuel pools are 100% meltdowns. Reactor 2, that also had two fuel pools, were all 100% meltdown. Each fuel pool had decades of reactor cores. Reactor, I spelled that one wrong, 3 and two fuel pools, 100% meltdown. Reactor 4 and two fuel pools. Reactor 3, I spelled it wrong, did I? We fixed that so I don't have to fool with it the next time. Oh, made it worse. Hang on, bear with me. My God. I shouldn't be allowed to own the camera, let alone the computer. Look at me. We'll get there. I think I got it this time. I know. Reactor 4 is 100% meltdown. I'm Dana, and we're off and running. We're going to talk about the ALP system. I was at TEPCO's website and got a whole lot of documentation that is factually 100% wrong, and I feel that I should mention. So whenever this first showed up, this picture of these reactors, I get you on the wrong one already, do I? If any scientists seen reactor 3 and 4, they would have immediately said, well, that's destroyed, everything's gotten loose. There's nothing left there. If they had any integrity at all, at least one of them would have come out and said that, right? But we're talking about the nuclear industry, so don't go looking for integrity. Don't go getting disappointed right away. Reactor 3 and 4, so 2 years later when they stripped these stumps down to the stumps, surely some academic could have came out and said, no, it's all gone. There's no maybes about it. Oh, well, they seen the explosions, they knew it was all gone too. And I do mean any nuclear scientist looks at that, knows it's gone. It's not opinion, it's gone. The fuel pool, the reactor cores are gone. And anybody looked a little deeper would have seen the explosions and said, well, yeah, they're definitely gone. And when they seen these fake contraptions put over reactor 3 and 4, there was 4 reactors that were lost, then they knew that was the cover story. And the cover story looks exactly like this. So you're up against people that don't understand the very basics, and I just showed it to you. And the majority of people have no concept of the basics. They never looked at the buildings. Nuclear scientists worldwide are counting on nobody looking at the buildings. Give me 1 second. I don't want to cough in your face or nothing. So the world media came out and pretend they're in a building that don't exist. So you don't really need to think about the water filtration system because you know it's all fake, right? But we'll go after their narrative just for a bit of fun. Break up the week a little tiny bit. So there's major medias worldwide pretending they're in a building that don't exist, but we're talking about the fuel or the tanks, the 1,000 tanks. And the 1,000 tanks were all built in 2013 in one go. Because the ALPs didn't work back then, the Riva system didn't work, the Siri system didn't work, the Curon didn't work, all the filtration systems can't work because you have to contain everything. You can't separate the atoms. And don't let anybody tell you can. So I'm just going to play this clip of the media pretending they're in the building to the left, at the very top of the building. They're pretending they're at the top of these depictions. They're way above the fuel pool, which is one there and one over there, and the reactor's at the top also. So in order for them to do what they're doing, they have to look down on the building. So the buildings were 65 meters high, 190 feet tall, 19-story buildings, and they were 150 feet wide. These are big buildings. And so think about how big this is. You can see the guy walking there. This is how wide it is. But there's 4 of them. And so this part right there is that part right here. Right is the bottom part. So that part is taller than both of reactor 3 and 4 stacked on top of each other because reactor 3, for instance, completely gone. Reactor 4 was stripped, and appropriately so. You can see the guts are hanging out of it. So the idea is to pretend that didn't happen and get you to focus on water. Now, normally the reactors need 1 million gallons a minute, 4,500 tons a minute. And each day, a single reactor would fill up the 1,000 tanks 6 times before they ran out of control and at enormous temperatures. Okay, let me play this clip of the media pretending they're actually in the fuel pool, because if you knew and you don't know about this, then...
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
Okay, so that brings us over to the poll. Let's check out the poll before we jump too far down the rabbit hole. Was Japan's ALP water filtration system meant to fool us into complacency to hide Fukushima's dangers? So I'll explain that to you. And so that's exactly what's going on. And we know this because of, like, this is 2013 and 14, where they're pretending they're in a building that don't exist. And now they're pretending they're filtering water that don't exist. The tanks were built so you didn't focus on what happened. There was 4 reactors that melted down. Now the plume covered the planet. And in this model it does it in 31 days, but the majority of the model agrees with that time frame, where the whole planet is completely covered forever with perpetual radioactive fallout that never goes away. The official story that we're talking about tonight is how much tritium is in the tanks. Let's forget the reactors have detonated and disappeared and were covered up. Let's get everybody to focus only on something that means nothing. Keep them fighting over... So you'll see Greenpeace and everybody talking about the tritium instead of talking about uranium, plutonium, the curium isotopes, the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod, and the thousands of other fission products. So the official story came out before they announced the release, and this was on July the 13th, 2023 of this year. An author is the professor of the Department of Nuclear and Quantum Engineering. So if you can't trust him, who can you trust? He said the 1,000 tanks have a total of 2.2 grams of tritium. And so 2.2 grams of tritium is a little over 2 of these 1 gram coins. But the amount they're going to release each year, because nothing's got out, he said, despite the fact that everything got out, the official story is nothing got out, and they're going to release 116.666 each year, 1/16 of that coin worth of tritium. And he said it's the equivalent of throwing 3 grams of sugar into the ocean. We had a poll last night, or before. Should the International Atomic Energy Agency be outlawed worldwide after heinous claims that only 2 grams of tritium were released from 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools that melted down? So they picked up 30 million one-ton bags of radiation. Some say 60,000 or 30 million. Some say 60 million.
There's about 60 million tons of contaminated soil that's being stored, planned to be stored.
So saying 60 million bags, quite a 60 million. Now, I say 30 million because we can prove that. That's the tsunami coming in and hitting the plant. I downloaded that from TEPCO's website today. So the reactor cores are at the top of the buildings, the fuel pools are at the top of the buildings. So let me run you through the reactors. Let me run you through the reactors. And this is reactor 1. It's blue. Its fuel pool actually detonated. I showed you that earlier. And right alongside it is unit 2, which is this one right there. Now this stack was 25 sieverts. That was a lethal dose last year. What you're seeing, a pretty one right there, that's the Medusa. It's known as reactor 3. There's this pup right there. And this is lethal doses. Now, they sent in the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. So when you see people there, don't be swayed into thinking that everything is fine, because it's not. And then the bad boy behind it, behind reactor 3, you can see it right there, is reactor 4. Now, reactor 3 was a mixed oxide fuel reactor. That's super important. Mixed oxide fuel reactor. So what they did, they hoodwinked you right away. They brought in a cement pump truck. They're not meant to pump water. I actually got some videos of it pumping coming up. And which is extraordinary, really, that we got those videos. And this was meant to lull you into complacency, to make you think that maybe the fuel pool, because that's what it actually looks like. There is no fuel pool. It was a 190 feet tall building. The fuel pool's right about around 150 feet up. And so reactor 4, you can see it over there in reactor 3 right here. And they brought in barges to bring in fresh water too, because the reactors are pumping salt water on the reactors. And this is the U.S. Navy barge, by the way. They brought in useless, stupid robots. You can see this one is actually connected. And I'm assuming pneumatic drive, because electronics are going to fail at some point, right? If this goes into a hot zone, you can never go near it again. So this video, I'm going to play, well, we'll talk about it. So there's a helicopter flying in. The tsunami is just backed out. They're going into, you can see the water everywhere. And they're hovering over reactor, I'll tell you in a second. I can figure it out. That looks like reactor 3, but give me a second. Yeah, that's reactor 3. That's reactor 4. So they're flying north. They got the ocean to their back, so they're flying south. Okay. So that's the tsunamis after running through there. That's the first footage. Now also you can see the water down on the ground between the buildings that time. Let me go backwards for a second. See the water? That's reactor 4. So that's the original footage. And that's reactor 3. Those pilots probably would have died that day. All 600 pilots died at Chernobyl, every one of them. So they faked all the reactors, and now they're going to pretend that the only thing you need to worry about is water, but it's like 3 grams of sugar. That's so it gets so confusing that we're going to we got a lot of stuff you probably haven't seen before tonight. ALPs treated water. Japan's regulatory, which says something for a lot of the people, because I've been at this a long time, and we bring a lot of documentation to the table over the years. Japan's regulatory standards for discharge are set based on recommendations of the International Commission for Radiological Protection, also known as United Nations, same as IAEA is known as the United Nations. And the regulatory agencies of every country, their rules and regulations are from the United Nations, which they have many different subsidy companies like IRPA, UNSCLEAR, the International Atomic Energy Agency. There's very many of these. The next video, and I translated it, is the initial release of the ALPs treated water. So it's not the release of it, but they're taking, well, it is the release. And what he does is where the release is happening, he gets a sample bottle, and they're going to use that to make sure that it's not too much tritium. Because tritium is what you're supposed to be worried about, right? Which, of course, is not true. You better be worried about the meltdowns. So let's play this. So he's taking a sample with his great big thick rubber gloves on. Oh, he's got double gloves on, does he? Gotta be extra careful when you're Japanese, apparently. Make sure you fill it all the way to the top so whoever opens it spills it over themselves. Now, officially, the inside of Reactor 4 looks like this. This is all the media and International Atomic Energy Agency in 2014. Despite the fact that they admit they haven't been there until this year, and they made 5 trips this year. But from here to 2011, they've never went there. But the media claimed this was International Atomic Energy Agency, which is UN, the military-industrial complex, and the world's media was invited in. But the reality of it was that the building looks like that. It doesn't look like that. And you can see that crane over there, the green crane. That's what they're up there playing on, up there inspecting everything, looking down on the fuel pool that never existed. And every academic and journalist on the planet who researched it would have known the fuel pool didn't exist. And they would have been able to talk to experts who would say, yeah, what are you talking about? There's no fuel pool. Silly man. So you got multiple nuclear meltdowns there, and they're working, the homeless. But nobody can go to Donerae in Scotland that the kingdom had left behind for the next 300 years. But you're in Fukushima and you're going to clean it all up. And in 300 years when you're finished, or in a few years when you're finished, you're going to hit the Donerae and fix that too, are you? Okay, this is another flyover. A very short video, this one. It's very grainy stuff. It was 680 by 4, or 640 by 480. And so, those people got deadly, that's a deadly dose right there. So they would have died that day. That's reactor 4. You're looking at. And that must have been, they would have had to abandon that helicopter right away. That would have only flown one time. Even if it was brand new, they never would have flown that again. There are some pictures of fire trucks. There was, I think they had 5 fire trucks there. Only one survived the tsunami. And there was no way to get trucks there unless they brought it in, dropped it off with the Sikorsky helicopters. And apparently that's what they done. These are, now they're down on the seaside of the pump houses. So the pump house between them and the reactors. Reactors are on the other side of the building to your left. So this is the second release of the ALPs treated water. Now, I'm going to explain the ALP system to you coming up, and you'll sneer when you realize how phony that story actually is.
海水槽ポンプブラボー起動操作実施します。海水槽ポンプブラボー起動操作実施する了解。
So everything they're writing is blocked out. Their faces are blocked out because they got nothing to hide. There's something on the right-hand side. The screens are all blocked out. Why do they block everything and then publicly release it? What's TEPCO up to? It gets worse. So why do they have whatever that is on the bottom of the button? Why is that, why is that blocked out? I can't figure that out for the life of me. They've done a good job of blocking it out, right? And the phone, all you can see is, well, it's not a phone, it's a... And so it's got a lock on it. This is the release of the ALPs water. This is the official... Apologies here, I'll get it together. It's never been touched. You can tell how clean that is. They must have dusted it every day. They're putting the key in. So why is that hid away, though? Why they got that redacted? Why were the screens redacted? Because this is a big moment, right? They're going to turn out the floodgates and everybody can sit back. TEPCO, a non-decommissioned authority, has everything under control. And why is that screen behind it pixelated out? The cameras are supposed to be watching water. It's supposed to be... This is from TEPCO's website today. He's going to put the key in. He's going to put the key in and... Make sure he's got all kinds of keys on that chain. Look at that. He's got his house key, mail key on that chain there that time. He's pretty nervous. He dropped the keys. Oh my God, he really did it. The whole story is insane, isn't it? What they're doing there. Now, let's go back to 2013. Japan working to speed up decommissioning of Fukushima Daiichi reactors. Let's find out how they got here. The report detailed the sad fact that the actual workers, the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language, because it ain't typical, were being paid 1,000 yen, $11 US, each day to work in the most dangerous job in history. So, you have to be insane to trust anybody that's that cruel. To send people into a nuclear wasteland to get lethal doses and then pay them $11 a day. Because somebody else was getting the money that they were supposed to get. And there was supposed to be huge danger pay for anybody that went into it. In fact, there was areas that were so deadly, the only way they can get people, the homeless, to go in there was to offer them $3,000 for an hour. And because they didn't have to pay it out, right? In Fukushima City, over 90,000 homes are eligible for decontamination, but nothing got out on 2 grams of tritium. That's the official story this year. There's nothing got out. Anybody says different is a liar. That's the official story, right? And the media is there to back the story up. And there's a campaign with Taiwan, South Korea, Taiwan, China, and Japan to hoodwink the Asian countries, because you're talking about a few billion people, right? And you see the tanks are covered with regions. When you see that green, that's some kind of weird binding thing they spray on stuff because it's emitting, it's splitting atoms, right? And they're trying to keep the dose, the internal doses down because you're breathing this stuff in. You can't filter this stuff with face masks and paper suits. And if you look at Fukushima, that's all you're going to see. Ineffective, completely stupid. Science outweighs irrational reasoning. The author is a professor at the Department of Nuclear and Quantum Engineering. And so a lot of people shows this picture, but that's not Fukushima. A lot of media, right? The 1.37 million tons of wastewater stored in the Fukushima plant included approximately 2.2 grams of tritium. So they're saying everything here only has 2.2 grams of tritium, and that nothing got out of the building, and that's what their job is, to prove that nothing got out of that building. And whatever did, it's in the tanks, and it's only 2.2 grams of tritium. And don't worry about that either, because it's equal to 3 grams of sugar, and that's a professor of nuclear and quantum engineering that are saying the Meltdowns emissions are equal to. So it's very, whoever put together this public relation propaganda hit piece on humanity at 8 million species didn't know too much about nuclear, apparently. April 21st, 2014, because I'm still trying to set the stage first before we get into the meat of the show tonight, of the TEPCO's bizarre assertions that their ALP system can filter anything. TEPCO unable to bring contaminated water issues under control at Fukushima Daiichi. And even if you could filter everything, nothing's left. It was all gone. Right? Everything was gone right away. Within day 5, all the reactor cores and all the fuel pools were gone. And so they covered the planet in a plume that is still hammering, and it's still hemorrhaging out of there right now as we talk. Let me get myself back in the right position here. Because it's a fascinating story, but it's a very deadly what they got done to you. And only you can set humanity free. It's too late to save the species, but we might be able to salvage humanity. So the bottom depiction is less than 30 days of radioactive fallout. By the way, that's reactor 3, the mixed oxide fuel, the Medusa, an actual Medusa. TEPCO is unable to bring contaminated water issues under control. Now, the tanks were built hastily to hold highly contaminated water. Not tritium, but highly contaminated water. So the water they're talking about, the ALP system is yet to function reliably. What year was that? Oh, that's right, 2014. So the tanks were built to hold highly contaminated water, which is, you're talking about 2.2 sieverts per liter of beta, not counting alphas and neutrons and gammas, which would have been equal. But 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. And so if you actually fill the tanks with the highly contaminated water like they're suggesting, you're talking about 1.4 million sieverts per tank, which meant you couldn't build another tank there. But the story is not based on that. The story is based on you not understanding 4 meltdowns and 8 fuel pools and these nuances, and believe in their version, which is it's not even a fairy tale for the nuclear industry. It's completely, once you look into it, you see the explosions, and how are you going to get the fuel out of the pool, like you claimed in 2021, or the 10th anniversary claim they got the fuel out of the spent fuel pools. They done the same thing in 2013 and 14 for reactor 4. Fukushima is the most terrifying situation you can imagine. I've seen a paper which says, bye-bye Japan, evacuate North America's west coast if Unit 4 goes after a quake. But abandon the west coast if that building goes. That's 2013. David Suzuki in Calgary, or Alberta anyway, was asked about it. And he said he's seen a paper which said if number 4 goes, bye-bye Japan, you should evacuate the coastlines of North America, and you should, right? And you still should, because of the radioactive fallout. And I know that sounds crazy, but just because you can't perceive it and you don't understand the big picture, doesn't mean it's not so. So they rolled out all kinds of apologists, and you can see Maggie Gunnarsson over there. She worked as a spokesperson for the nuclear industry for decades, and she's married to Arnie Gunnarsson, who made, the company he worked for made the racks for the assemblies that took the fuel rods and the fuel pools like behind them. So his version is that it's like a crushed pack of cigarettes, except that he was in a lot of the media that were showing those pictures, and he didn't come out and denounce it. And he said that the fuel pools were intact, but it was very dangerous, like a crushed pack of cigarettes. But the fuel pools would have been 4 times the height of whatever is you want to call that stump there, that useless stump that should have been raised all the way to the ground. Now, the amount of water went from the leaks was measured at 2 sieverts an hour of just beta, because that's all they could measure with the counter that they were using. But it would have been equal in alphas, neutrons, and gammas, and then by proxy x-rays. Which meant that if you took 2 liters of it to a subway station and left it in a container or put it in the wall or something, everybody who walked past it for the next million years would die that day or that week. Most people wouldn't be, most hospitals wouldn't know what happened to them outside of their organs melted. But the tanks were built for highly radioactive water, and in 2014, the ALPs system, the Arriva system, and I'll show you the other ones, didn't work. They admit that, and I'll show you the evidence a number of times during this. So what they're trying to do is, and not trying to do, what they're successfully doing is hoodwinking the entire planet and accepting that there is no issues. That the only issue was tritium, and claiming that that's not an issue. They have a limit, and the limit's safe. Whatever they say is good. Nothing else matters. Reality doesn't matter. So popular science. Japan's plan to release the treated water from the Fukushima nuclear plant is actually pretty safe, says moron from hell. International regulators say the water is extremely safe. But they don't show you this picture and say, oh, by the way, this is what happened. They show you that picture about tritium. The country is running out of space contained to fallout. Nice choice of words. Over 1 million metric tons of radioactive water is currently housed in a massive on-site metal tanks, enough to fill the 500 Olympic swimming pools. We hear this all the time, right? Outside of reactor 1 was over 1 million sieverts, because it threw the reactor cores out of the fuel pool. Now, the reactor core itself burnt for days and then went deep into the earth, where it's still burning today at around 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And it doesn't need oxygen. This is the top of number 1. This is the original footage. I got some video coming up in 3 clicks or 4 clicks. This is reactor 2. This is 100% meltdown and the loss of all the inventories in the fuel pools, which could have been up to 10 reactor cores, because they're insane. There's 70 reactors in America with that same attribute, exact same models, where they store the reactor cores for 40 years at the top of the buildings. So that's reactor 3, and over there is reactor 4. They're all gone. That's the original footage of reactor 4. We got some footage coming up. My apologies. So these are not the large tanks, by the way, and most of the tanks are that size. So there's nowhere near the tonnage that they're talking about, for starters. That the tanks themselves, if you fill them up with stuff from the milk, so what they're doing is they're pouring water. They claim 130 tons a day over the reactor cores. They're pumping that back up, and it goes into the tanks. That's what they've done for the first number of years, right? But 130 tons a day, your typical 3/8-inch garden hose with 30 psi, which is your house pressure for your water, is 140 tons a day. So what they're saying is they took a garden hose, a 3/8-inch standard garden hose, split it 4 ways, and sprayed. That's what they sprayed on each reactor each day. Was that trickle on 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures? Was that trickle from a garden hose split 4 ways? And that's what's in the tanks today. But it's been filtered. Now the problem with the filter was, first off, the buildings were gone right away. And that's what they don't want you to think about and don't want you to comprehend. So they got you caught up in this beautiful, look how beautiful the tanks are. If you put the gammas, the alphas, the neutrons, the betas down in the tanks, they mingle they settle down on the bottom in what's known as sludge. And then the neutrons will cause a chain reaction. So you have a criticality in the tanks that'll burn a hole immediately through the tanks, and tanks will drain, like we've seen at Hanford, like we've seen at the Moyac, like we've seen in United Kingdom. And so this is the water pumping house. And again, we get these views of them up on these. We should see part of it. It doesn't make any sense, right? So first off, if you fill up these tanks, these are small compared to what they claim they are. It would be about 1.4 million sieverts, which is lethal doses. So for the number of years, all the way up until 2018, they were pushing that picture over there, which was the tsunami from NOAA. But NOAA had an actual radioactive contamination of model for radiation. They hid that, and then they came out and mocked everybody who believed in that, who said, oh my God, look at the chart here, right? This shows radiation in the ocean. Hey, stupid, that's the tsunami. And they would be really arrogant, and they would just shoot down anybody gullible or who put their fate in the fake media with promoting that kind of narrative. And it was everywhere. If you go out and search today, Fukushima, Pacific Ocean, that's the picture that's going to dominate your search engine. They're still doing it. They're very methodical, these people. And they're the type that if the house is on fire, they will get up and run out and they won't say nothing to you. But authorities need to make room for the naturally occurring groundwater and rain that will continue to become contaminated. Rain and groundwater. So they're saying they got to get rid of everything that they got on site to make room for the other stuff. It needs to make room for naturally occurring groundwater. And rains that will continue to become. Now, the top left-hand corner is 20 days of radioactive fallout of the xenon-133. Because nothing is contained. Everything got out. TEPCO is already filtering the water to remove most of its radioactive isotopes. To do this, contaminated waters pass through multiple standalone chambers, each containing various absorbents to remove specific radioactive isotope. So you got chambers, the water goes through each one removes its own separate isotopes. So I can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, and I can't see it. And so let's say 50,000 of the 200 million atoms on the head of a needle that I can't see or perceive. And they're saying that each filter can all the atoms are the same size, by the way. And they're saying that their filters, because nobody else has ever developed a system like that, and even today, 12 years later, everybody's still trying to do it on their own, and everybody knows you can't do it. All you can do is contain everything. Because you can't filter, if you take a drop of water, you can't filter all the atoms out of a drop of water. So go back to 2013, Japan marine experts. Fukushima radioactive tanks may have already been emptied into the Pacific Ocean. Water passed through multiple standalone chambers and Pacific. Supported the plan arguing that humans are exposed to low levels of tritium every day. So supporters of the plan are arguing that you're exposed to tritium via tap water, air, and rain. And so therefore, don't worry about it, right? That's what they're trying to do to you. And the only reason you're exposed to tritium is because of the perpetual releases from all nuclear power plants worldwide for 80 years. You can't avoid it anymore. And it has a 120-day half-life and is deadly for children. On the discharge of the ALPs, and they always use the word treated everywhere. You'll see it everywhere if you look up, if you're not familiar with the subject. 3 entities in charge, external agencies commissioned by TEPCO. And everybody's, look at that, everybody's left-hand face blacked out. These are the scientists checking the water. Except for, it can remove everything except for tritium. Remains in the ALPs treated water. Now, the problem with the story was, the problem with the story is that the filter, and you like this picture here, I'm going to show you, hang on. They got duct tape holding the pipes together. Look at that. Is that just me, or is there duct tape holding that pipe together? Hard cases. Other nuclear plants around the world currently release tritiated water into the ocean, so it's okay, see? So this is the game that they're playing. But did those other power plants around the world detonate and lose their entire inventories, all their reactor cores? Did they melt down? So, but this is a straw man argument is what they're doing to you. So they're saying other nuclear power plants around the world release tritiated water into the ocean and rivers at even higher levels than what will come from Fukushima. So they're saying the levels that normally release are higher than what's coming from nuclear meltdowns. He's a popular science staff writer, and he covers tech news, and he likes the Rolling Stones and GQ and Slate and NBC. And he basically will cut your throat for his paycheck each week. He's a degenerate scumbag is what he actually is. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree in religious study. So why is he writing about nuclear meltdowns at Fukushima for? Okay, isn't that a shaky helicopter? This is original footage when you see this kind of stuff. This is the helicopter flying over the melted reactors immediately after the tsunami receded. And that's reactor 2 in your left-hand corner. That's reactor 3. I'll just duck out for a second. This is completely gone. The fuel pools and the reactor cores were ejected right out of the building. It's extraordinary footage. It's extraordinary footage. This first footage, I'm going to have to study this a lot. There's a lot going on here. It's grainy as shit, but that doesn't matter. It's the actual footage. Remember, everything you're seeing there, all the trees are down, are cut down. Everything there is cement and like a spray on cement to keep the doses down because there's so many fuel pellets landed everywhere from these detonations. These were massive detonations. People on the West Coast, right to be concerned about Fukushima plume. Things can get worse and lots of radioactivity is flown into the ocean. And the government is not testing the water or the fish. 2013. The work at Fukushima plant to go on for 10,000 years. That's 2013. Longer than the human history. Nuclear expert. Professor engineer at Seoul National University. Not at this current administration's mouthpieces will hang you and everybody else. Professor, the Korean Times, this is a South Korean professor, it's true 70% of Japan's territory is polluted by Fukushima radioactive material. The professor they rolled out with nuclear and quantum engineering degrees is saying it's like 3 grams of sugar. But if you go back to 2013, the South Korean professors are saying 70% of the country, the territory is polluted by Fukushima. And Tokyo was contaminated with highly toxic radiation. And so there was a lot of dissenting voices. Expert worry about catastrophic impact on health. This nuclear disaster, the Fukushima nuclear disaster, still casts a shadow over Japan. 12 years after the Fukushima disaster, Japan authorities started pumping wastewater. And now, so the color waste, it's, as you'll see coming up, this is supposed to be a sampling station for their tritium. It's 100% garbage, what they're trying to do to you, see? So the idea is you don't search out that. You don't try to appreciate that the fuel pools reactor cores were at the top of the buildings, so it's already long gone. It was gone on day 5 and 6. By March the 16th, everything was gone. There's still some left over. They're still burning down today, but the majority of the inventories, and we're talking about a huge amount in each building, 4 decades worth, stored in fuel pools. And so the reason they put it in fuel pools at the top of the buildings is it's so hot, and it boils off like 120,000 liters of radiation a day, because each liter is saturated with isotope because it's still splitting atoms. So you take the reactor core out that was boiling water for 1 million homes, put it in a pool, it's still splitting the same atoms, except it's not under the pressure anymore, right? But it's still producing those atoms. And they're boiling water, and that water is up to the tall, skinny stacks, and that's why the majority of these places are surrounded by farms. You're being exterminated through your supermarkets. So this was I'm just going to check the audio this time before, because it's just going to be Japanese, I think. Doesn't matter, we're going to scroll through it anyway. And they always have a long beginning. Oh, that's another picture, this one here. So what is blotted out under, because see that redacted piece under his hand there? Both of them and their papers on the table are redacted. This is the first releases from TEPCO. They're worried that terrorists are going to see something here and attack TEPCO. All right, so they got everything hid. All the screens are hid, their hands are, their paper in front of them are hid, their heads are hid. It doesn't make any sense, right? Oh, I'm sorry, let me go back to that. So this part here, I'm just going to let that play the normal speed. I'll get it out of the way. He's doing a sample, eh? So he dropped this down into where they're pumping water into the ocean, the final release. And then they take out a sample. And they got a bucket there to make sure. And they got paper towels. Look at the beautiful paper towels. These guys are insane, eh? And they're going to send that to the IAEA, rather. Give it to them. And they're going to bring it back and test it to make sure that their findings are the same as TEPCO. Because they don't check on their own, right? They've only been there 5 times. All of them was this year. New report details International Atomic Energy Agency independent checks of treated water discharge from Fukushima Daiichi. Now, we've covered the International Atomic Energy Agency, who said they're not a regulatory agency. They don't have the authority to compel anybody in any country, let alone TEPCO or Japan, to do anything. And it's up to the Japan government to have the final say in what to do with the water. We got tons and tons and tons of that documentation this year alone. The IAEA task force, we're almost 13 years in. This is their first trip there in 13 years. Established review the safety of Japan's plan to discharge the ALP, Advanced Liquid Processing System. Treated water, and released its 3rd report. The International Atomic Energy Agency review of the safety-related aspects of the handling of the ALPS treated water at TEPCO's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Now, they came out with a list of isotopes that were in the water. And so today when I went back there, the page doesn't exist anymore. Lucky for me, you know what, I'm like a pack rat. I grab everything I read, and I read more than most people can even conceive each day. Okay, so I happen to grab everything. That's right here where it starts. No, right there. There's 48 pages, I believe, yeah. The document was produced with the financial assistance of the organizations shown here. By the way, this is a German model from a major government institution of CC-137 dispersal over 6 years. Over 6 years. But officially, 2023, nothing got out any 2.2 grams of tritium, and all of that is stored in the 1,000 tanks. Right, so officially it's 2.2 grams of tritium, and it's in the 1,000 tanks, and there's nothing else. And that's what they mean. Nothing. There's nothing got out. Nothing. Despite the fact that everything actually got out. Consistent with the relevant International Atomic Energy Agency safety standards, and their standards are based on natural stuff, not anthropogenic man-made stuff. We cover this all the time. They're actually not based on man-made radiation, their standards. They're based on potato chips, walking in the sunshine, and getting on an airplane and climbing mountains. And the whole thing is rigged, and it's just not tenable anymore. They're destroying everything and everybody's future, and it's the most important subject in history. Unfortunately, the world is sleepwalking into a planned apocalypse. TEPCO is required to determine the characteristics and activity of the ALPs treated water. So the criminal itself is required to test the water. So what's the point of having the regulatory agencies and International Atomic Energy Agencies and UNSCLEAR and ERPA and the IPRC and the 100 other radiation organizations? And on each of those 100 organizations, it's the same 100 people. And it's very rigged. And actually, let me play that clip, because that clip will never get old. It's Kathleen Higley talking. She's just one of the spokespersons that day. The people you're seeing there, Kyle Vetter, over to your right. There's TEPCO's scumbag. There's Miles O'Brien, the one-armed bandit. The former head of the NRC. The professor sitting by the flag of unknown, and Kathleen Higley. Kathleen Higley. And Kathleen Higley is going to explain to you the scam they've been running for a very long time about radiation. They set the policies for your communities, for your hospitals, for your children, for emergencies. And these are the worst humans you can imagine. They're 100% out to destroy you. Their job is to protect the nuclear industry and stomp on you every step of the way.
When I was trying to pull this talk,
I'm sorry about that. My apologies. I'll just adjust the volume. 1 second.
together, not only will I sort of get a little philosophical about the impacts and the like and try to put things in context, but I also want to talk a little bit about who are these radiation experts that get trotted out in events like this, or that get to participate in various activities and analysis to make pronouncements about is something safe or not safe. And if you look, you'll see organizations that are often represented. The ICRP, International Commission on Radiological Protection, a premier organization. You'll see UNSCEAR and ERPA. So UNSCEAR is the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation. ERPA, the International Radiation Protection Association. The IAEA and some of its folks, the International Atomic Energy Agency.
They're all United Nations.
our own U.S. NCRP. And then there are a number of other organizations. So there's PAHO, there's a Health Physics Society, there's World Health Organization. All of these will bring in, as necessary, experts to speak to you on issues related to radiation protection, radiation safety, and impacts. But if you go a little deeper and you start looking at these organizations, the ICRP, for example, very well known, it's been operating nearly 100 years, not quite. Main commission, 10 people. It's got 5 standing committees, so it's 100-ish folks. I lead one of the 5 committees. If you look at the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation that looked at the effects from Chernobyl, from Fukushima, from other areas, and that has about 30, roughly, countries that are represented in that group. If you start teasing through these pictures, you're going to see the same people on every one of those organizations. So the same people from ICRP are on UNSCEAR, they're in IRPA. If you look at the NCRP, again, the U.S. organization that advises the country on radiation protection issues, it's 100 people, a lot of gray-haired 100 people. And most of them are part of UNSCEAR, are part of IRPA, are part of ICRP, participate in IAEA. So the result, or the real world, is that there's not that many folks that really do radiation safety, radionuclide transport, dose calculations, all of this in the world. It's a pretty small club. And we wear 20 hats. Today I put on 3 pins, and I could put on a whole bunch more, but Health Physics Society, ICRP, Certified Health Physicist, I've got NCRP on there, I've done IAEA, and so the point is, we're a small group, you should cherish us. So,
you should cherish us. So what? That's the press club. That's journalist. She's telling them what's what. This is 2013. All the spent fuel removed from Reactor 4 fuel pool at Fukushima number 1, TEPCO says, okay. That's Reactor 4. You can't get the fuel out of the pool when that was 4 times the height you got there now of the stump. Was 4 times that height above it. So how can you get the fuel out of the pool, right? To establish and implement monitoring programs, I'm going to turn that down one little notch. To establish and implement monitoring programs to ensure the public exposure, like they're worried about the public, due to the discharge is adequately assessed. Due to the discharge, make sure to protect the public. Dana, they're trying. Dana, give them a break, for God's sakes. Yeah, but the buildings blew up, and they didn't tell you, and it covered the whole planet. And they didn't try to warn you then. What makes you think they're trying to warn you now? Because I can guarantee you they're not trying to warn you or protect you. They couldn't care less about you, my goodness. The chosen operational perimeters for the discharge was an annual limit of 22 trillion terabecquerels of tritium, a concentration limit of 1,500 becquerels a liter of tritium in the discharges. Canada releases not 22 trillion becquerels, and so think of a becquerel as an atom that pulses energy every second. That's a becquerel. That's the becquerel. In Canada, they're going to release 22 trillion becquerels of tritium. That's because, nothing else got out of the buildings, obviously, Dana. Canada releases, just at a New Brunswick plant, 14,600,000 trillion a year. So you divide 22 into 14,600,000, and you can see how much more just Canada's single reactor releases. Which is extraordinary, by the way. It's hideous. No wonder so much diseases and illnesses, not only deficiencies and injuries in Canada. A concentration limit of 1,500 becquerels is a limit of tritium in the discharge. All they do is lie, and whoever come up with the law is terrible when it comes to nuclear. Japan plans to flush the radioactive Fukushima water into the ocean. Do I have running water there? I can't remember. The Japanese government ran out of space. This is 2019, I believe. To keep the contaminated water from 3 nuclear reactor plants destroyed in the March 2011 earthquake. And tsunami struck the northeast. The water was contaminated after coming in contact with the fuel. They're going to release 1.09 million of the water in 900 tanks in 2019. In 2013, they had 1,000 storage tanks. I got a whole bunch of those headlines coming up later. And it contains of 1,000 storage. So they had them all full, basically, in 2013. TEPCO has sole responsibility for source monitoring at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. So TEPCO, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, which took down that PDF file, because this is recent, they released it, so it got in the way, I guess, so they took it down, or they moved it somewhere else, because it's not where I had it in my bookmark. TEPCO has sole responsibility for source monitoring, and I showed you that earlier, at the Fukushima Daiichi. So TEPCO, not the nuclear regulatory agencies for Japan, are independent from other countries. In fact, you won't let anybody independently check the water. This was NOAA's radioactive dispersal model. And I can't remember the... this was released... I can't remember off the top of my head, so I shouldn't say anything because if I make a mistake, then everybody will beat me up later. All environmental monitoring related to the nuclear accident at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant is conducted according to the Comprehensive Radiation Monitoring Plan, which is the United Nations, and TEPCO, which is a non-decommissioned authority, and was bankrupt and was nationalized right away by the Japanese government. And other relevant Japanese authorities have responsibility. So nobody's checking it only to Japan, who has the most to lose by the truth coming out, right? Comprehensive radiological characterizations of samples of ALPs treated water is being conducted, but is not expected any significant detectable amounts of these radionuclides will be present in the samples analyzed. The International Atomic Energy Agency considers that it is necessary to promote confidence in TEPCO source monitoring. So this is their PDF, if you can find it. I showed you the headline of it earlier. It's page 18 of page 48. To promote confidence in TEPCO source monitoring. TEPCO is the boss, because they want you to blame TEPCO for, if anything goes wrong and people realize radiation killing the ocean, they want you to blame TEPCO, not the nuclear industry. And that's the only reason TEPCO still exists. Common radionuclides like 60 cobalt, 90 strontium, 106 rubidium, 125 silver, 129 iodine, 134, 137 cesium, 14 carbon, 99 technetium. And tanks from which the samples will be collected have been published. So there should be plutonium 238, 239, 240, 241 there. There should be curium 244 for sure. And many other curium isotopes there. Because they're the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods. Right? That's why we call them curium when they melt down, see? So go back to 2013, Japan working to speed up decommissioning of Fukushima Daiichi reactors, working to speed up. It takes a normal reactor 60 years or more to be decommissioned. They're going to speed it up. They're the new Holtex. The detailed sad facts that the actual workers themselves were being paid only $11 per day. And so a city of 90,000, because we skipped past this at the beginning, I just wanted to introduce it, of how radioactive the nuclear wasteland really is for those that are not aware. And 400 houses have been cleaned. You can't clean a house of radioactive fallout. The people that cleaned it would have been very sick by now. It's 90,000 houses, which is all the houses in Fukushima City and businesses and everything else. That's 90,000. That's how many buildings are there, is 90,000. So that everything should have been razed right to the ground and taken to a nuclear wasteland. All the sidewalks and all the schools, everything should have been razed right to the ground. You can't decommission it. You can't go in and scrub radiation away. It doesn't work that way. All right? But without being able to prevent the release of radioactive materials from the crippled Daiichi reactors from being dispersed across the country, reaccumulating in previously decontaminated areas, even houses that have been worked on previously, well, not may, but would require further work. Well, like, so if my house next door gets decontaminated, okay, and then you whatever that may entail, because you can't actually do it, but say you power wash the house, you're just going to spray the radiation on your neighbor's house. So now his is radioactive again, if it actually worked that way, see? You're going to liberate it into your garden, into your plants. It's retarded. I apologize for the reality. Okay, so this video is 40 times the normal speed, and this is hydrovolcanic plumes coming out of the ground where some of the reactor cores from reactor 1 and reactor 2 have tunneled themselves down into the earth. And what they done was they hit water, and water expands 1,100 cubic feet a second per liter. That splits the earth, and then the steam coming out of the ground, we know in 10 places, or 6 places, was 10 sieverts per hour. But the Geiger counter is maxed out at 10 sieverts per hour. And so this plume that you're looking at, I'll get it out of the way actually. I'm going to speed it up. So this is over 8-10 hours right now. Time's up above you. 50 minutes, that's 1 hour. So that plume is a lethal dose for everything that it touches. IAEA report, which means that everything is radioactive because the plume never stops coming out of there. So here was a table, page 20 of their 48 under PDF, which they took down after site recently because this is a recent one. So tritium-3H has a half-life of 12 years, 14 carbon, 5,700 years. There's 10 half-lives. And so all the isotopes that they're using there, now the fuel pools were at the top of the buildings. And the top of the buildings were ejected. Everything in the top of the buildings were actually ejected. And number 3 reactor, I'm talking about in particular right here, the explosion was felt 25 miles away. So this was a tough, there's a lot going on, right? You had a tsunami that came in. I'm going to play you a clip of that. So it was chaos. There's no doubt about it. I don't know why there's no sound on that. That one should have sound in it. I don't know what to make of that.
People near the coast should evacuate immediately.
So I'm not getting sound out of the other side. Okay, I won't worry about that right now. TEPCO gets approval to release more Fukushima water into the Pacific. 2015. So, utility hopes to be able to process and dump DUMP, dump, each day in 2013, and dump 150 of the 300 tons of contaminated water being produced each day. So that's each day they want to dump that into the Pacific Ocean. And who was going to stop them again? And so the isotopes that they're talking about, like 99 technetium with a 210,000 year half-life, the iodine with a 15, they're saying 16 million year half-life. This is just meant to give you false confidence in what they're doing. So this is a cement pump truck. This is a cement pump truck. And because I lost audio on this pane, I'm going to probably have to copy everything and put it in another pane where I got audio. So just give me a second, because that's one of the things you can do around here. Let me see if I can pull it off here. I'm just going to see if I can get my audio back. Might take me a second. Okay, we got audio. I didn't realize we had no audio. So this is really interesting. We haven't seen this. They're actually pumping water right into it. I'm zooming in for you. Zoom back a bit. So it's just a dribble, but the reactors are not there. We know this now in hindsight because you can see to the right there really wasn't anything left. That's the same building. So this was about manipulation, because any academic, hang on, move ahead. Any academic on the planet that looked at that building in the nuclear industry knew the reactor core and the fuel pools were gone. And reactor 4 happens to be the one reactor they refuse to say melt it down. That's the one they claimed they got the fuel out of in 2013. And that also means I can bring in my tsunami video and just play that. So let's just play that for a minute, so you can see the pandemonium. Anytime you're ready, dude.
People near the coast should evacuate immediately to higher ground if they are.
That warning was extremely good advice.
Prefecture in northeastern Japan, an intensity of 7 was recorded on the R studios.
When earthquakes hit newsrooms, it's easy to see straight away how powerful they are. And if they're out to sea, just off the coast, then the tsunami doesn't take long to turn up.
And this is a look, once again, at Kamaishi City in Iwate Prefecture. And it looks like the tsunami has been engulfing the port. You're seeing live footage of a tsunami engulfing the port area of Kamaishi City in Iwate.
The minister appeared on TV to put into play a plan they'd rehearsed for years.
We will secure the safety of the people of Japan, and in order to minimize the damage, the government will make every effort possible. And we ask the people of Japan to continue to be cautious and vigilant and keep tuned in to the reports on the television and radio. And we ask the people of Japan to act calmly.
While that was all happening in the northeast of Japan, Tokyo, the capital further south, was feeling it as well in different ways. TV channels showed fires burning.
There's lots of videos of that out there. But the big concentration is these freaking lousy few buildings have wreaked havoc on the entire planet. The Fukushima crisis comes to the United States, Professor. The new improved version of the original atomic plague is spreading, and that the truth is so incomprehensible, it's easier to pretend it doesn't exist. And they're going through a lot of trouble, the fake ALPs, the fake tanks, the fake fuel pools, to convince you and everybody else that is trying to understand what happened. So the person that's spraying these regions in a paper suit, no less, those people there will die that day. They're spraying the region because they know there's pellets there emitting physical atoms into the environment, still splitting atoms, right? Pieces of fuel rods. That's why they're spraying that kind of stuff. And so they got 238 uranium, the natural stuff. But there's nothing natural in those fuel pools. And then the pages where it was on my bookmark is now a dead link. And that never came out that long ago. But I showed you the title of it. You can probably find it. Pretty sure somebody else would have posted it. Leak of the contaminated water, Fukushima Daiichi number 3. Leak. That's 2014. So in 2014, reactor 3 looked like that over there. That's reactor 3 over there in 2014. Leak of contaminated water at the Fukushima Daiichi Unit 3 may have international safety impacts. Discovered a stream of water nearly a foot wide flowing through the first floor of the reactor buildings. Like, first off, there's zero possibility anybody's going in there. That's a lethal dose everywhere. That's a mixed oxide. That's the unbelievable lethal doses trying to get near that sucker. Before escaping to a drain on the floor after an investigation, found the water contained levels of radioactive material equal to highly contaminated water accumulating in the basement of the reactor buildings. The basements would have been exploded too, right? The reactor cores would have went right. If there anything left, it would have went down into the basement. But there was nothing left. It detonated and it tossed everything out. It was complete, expended. Reactor 3 went off like a firecracker and just left a stump. That's reactor 3, right? So, but reactor 2 stayed intact, and so the fuel pool and the reactor cores that burnt for a couple of days, they went deep into the earth. They're China syndrome. Reactor 1, the fuel pool detonated. There's lots of pictures of those explosions, and that meant the reactor core went deep into the earth because it doesn't just put itself out, right? It doesn't need oxygen to burn, so it'll burn really good in oxygen, and it'll burn really good anywhere else because it doesn't need oxygen. It revealed 24 million becquerels per liter of beta ray emitting radioactive materials, like plutonium, which includes strontium, 700,000 becquerels per liter of cesium-134, and 1.7 million becquerels per liter of cesium-137. And let's just say there was 1 million becquerels of iodine-131. It would have been 10 times more iodine-132, 30 times more iodine-133, 31 times more iodine-129. And it would have been saturated with the curium isotope, which they leave completely out of the equation. In fact, they're pretending none of that happened. This is officially this year. This is a professor of nuclear quantum engineering, Young Jong-il. He says it's equal to 2.2 grams is all that got out of the building. Just 2.2 grams. So the water filtration system is meant to lead you away from the well to a poison well. And that's his job. In fact, he's so ruthless, he says the Meltdowns is like throwing 3 grams of sugar cubes into the ocean. This is a professor of nuclear and quantum engineering. Ruthless. Yeah, that's ruthless, hateful, degenerate scum. Speaking of scum, let's back to TEPCO and the nuclear industry. Don't ask me. I don't have a clue. I don't speak Japanese. Thank goodness. So this is the water mixing system. This is one they let the journalists finally on the site to look at. That's what that room up there, all of the things you see in there is the water filtration system. It's such a good system. Why is everything covered with scaffolds over there? It's impossible to remove the hundreds of radioactive materials, the particles themselves, the 1,200 radionuclides. Only 62 can be reduced. Government approved the plan, it's 2015, to drain Fukushima nuclear waste into the ocean. And so what they do, they come out and show you these. And I'll show you what you should be what they really should be looking for in a second here. I think I know where it's to, but I better luck sometimes searching. I might get lucky here. Just one moment, please. I'll be right back. As soon as I get so much that gets pulled up on a search. There we go. I think we're in luck. 1, 2, buckle up my shoe. Yeah, we're in good shape. Let me see what else we got here. Oh, that's fun. Here we go. Let's try that mess. Researchers are too frightened to get within 100 kilometers of the nuclear meltdowns. That's where the homeless picks up. So they did show you plutonium. Look at that. Four becquerels. I've seen stuff with hundreds of thousands of becquerels per cubic meter of water of plutonium-239. So the biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rods is the curium isotopes. That's what they call it, a curium for the meltdown. And you hear iodine-129 a lot. So pre-nuclear industry, the ratio, this is natural stuff, which is different than the anthropogenic man-made, by the way. 129 iodine in the pre-nuclear age ocean was approximately 100 kilograms before the nuclear industry. The United Kingdom and La Hague contributed, just in the first little while, 1,640 kilograms in the English Channel and 720 kilograms in the Irish Sea, respectively. That just from Chernobyl, the nuclear fuel reprocessing, weapons testing. And that was just a short period of time. So you went from having 100 kilograms naturally, which is different than the anthropogenic man-made stuff, right? So in Ottawa, Canada, the study was 220 million atoms per liter of man-made anthropogenic iodine-129. So you're going to filter all the rain on the planet, that ALPs systems, because it's covering the planet over and over nonstop for 12 years. And TEPCO doesn't have a right to destroy your future and your loved one's future and the future of all species and humanity. They don't have that right. And we have an obligation. It's our obligation. We're obligated to hold them accountable, to hold their feet to the fire. because nobody else is doing it. The academic community has gone silent. Traitorously so. So this model is plutonium-239 dispersal. Okay. So huge numbers covering the entire planet. Huge numbers we're talking about covering the planet. But they're claiming that only 4 becquerels per liter will get into the ocean. But again, they cover the planet with 220 million atoms per liter of just the iodine-129. Right? Huge plumes of plutonium-239 dispersals covering the entire planet. And there's models like that out there for the iodine-131, but you can extrapolate there's 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133, 31 times more iodine-129. And that's what they do. But what they've done now is manipulated you to the complacency, and obviously not my regular viewers, but the detractors basically don't come around anymore because we win them over. They realize what kind of degenerate scumbags they are, and they have no way of beating me because I provide you the documentation. And that's the best way to get you educated, and the easiest way you educate other people is for me to make sure you have a really good foundation. An outstanding, if you're watching my stuff, you have an outstanding foundation. You have the best foundation on the entire planet because we're just straight up, right? Isotopes of xenon are not in, and the quantities, we've seen xenon-133 at 450,000 times above detection levels in the West Coast. That's sustained for that they emit to for weeks and weeks and weeks. TEPCO is not looking for nuclear scientists or nuclear academics or nuclear corporations or nuclear students. They're looking for people that can barely read or write, preferably not. They want people that can carry out a conversation. That sounds like some fine ups. That's the victims they're sending into the nuclear meltdown. So the Krypton, of course, the children are raised to believe Superman and Krypton is Superman's nemesis, but it's the child's nemesis. And the amount of Krypton that we're talking about is stunning. That showed up and because it's a very prolific isotope, and it's very harmful to the species and the ecosystem and humanity. Radioactive rain caused 130 schools in Korea to close. But today they're like, nothing got out on these 3 grams of sugar. So you go from one administration to another administration, and that administration is pro-nuclear. That means they're evil. They're going to be evil. Their job is to come out and make you incompetent so the nuclear industry can get their own way. And rain in California, as I just showed you, was stunning. All kinds of the radioactive sulfur, hydrogen peroxides, which aren't on these tables, right? Because these are scumbags. The isotopes of uranium, they're not looking for and those numbers would have been extraordinary. All the plutonium would have been extraordinary. The americium would have been extraordinary. Neptunium, we got studies on the neptunium. Plumes that covered the entire planet, 239, I believe. Yeah, 239. This is modeled on TEPCOs. So to suggest that they're filtering this is quite the stretch, right? They're saying nothing got out and everything is being filtered. And you can't just, if you're looking for strontium-90, you got to look for all the other strontiums. If you're looking for a cesium-137, you got to look at all the other cesium. They're going to be in the plumes. If you see a plume of neptunium-239, it's going to be loaded with curium, it's going to be loaded with uranium, it's going to be loaded with plutonium, americium. And, like the plutonium is nasty. The 239, 238, 239, 240, 241s. But the curium isotopes, which is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod, needs lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. So if you got curium isotopes in your driveway and garden, that's pulsing right through your house. It matters, okay? And that's why they wouldn't get in within 100 kilometers, because they're not going to go by the fairy tale. They're going to go with reality. 2014, February 24th, almost 3 years later, Tokyo Electric determined human errors caused the contaminated leak. Human errors. So look, if these tanks were full of the radioactive material that they're sucking up, if there's rainwater and water running through the site, and they're pouring in a garden hose split 4 ways, and each of them are pointed at one reactor, because that's 130 tons a day as a garden hose. If you're going to believe their version, then you can't get close enough to put a garbage bag around a pipe. It's ludicrous to suggest you would do something like that. Because now you got a whole bunch of radiation piled up. If you try to get near it now, it'll kill you. And you see these useless scaffolds all the time. What's up with that? They have no purpose whatsoever. It's got a zero purpose. But you'll see them everywhere. And how many homes? And they're never built properly. When you look at them, none of them are like a scaffolder will do a beautiful job, blow you away how beautiful it actually looks. And I've used that type of scaffolding before, so I kind of know a thing or two. I use it a lot. I worked commercially at it for several months, so I'm very familiar with it. According to the utilities, because I had open access to everything, according to the utilities, over 100 tons of water containing 240 million becquerels per liter of beta-ray emitting substances leaked out of the storage tank over a period of 9 hours before the leak was discovered. So if you discover a leak like that 9 hours later, you died. Somebody discovered you. You didn't discover jack shit. You were dead. Right? And you would have to come in with all kinds of steel plates after it stopped in order to get in there and try to get some homeless to get close enough to fix anything. The water which leaked was partially treated. So it was partially treated early in the disaster. Well, they never had nothing that worked early in the disaster, right? We know that. Because, like, if any kind of filtering system immediately bioaccumulates hundreds and thousands of sieverts within a few hours, how are you going to change that filter? You can't get within a gunshot of it without getting a lethal dose. So they can't do it, see? So everything has to go into the ocean. You can't contain nothing. The doses are too high. You can't walk past the hoses. 240 million becquerels per liter of beta-ray emitting substances. Per liter. So how much is of gammas? How much is in the alphas? How much is neutrons? How much X-rays does that create? That's a stunning revelation right there. So they do mention curium isotopes. They do acknowledge that it exists, but not in a ratio that's appropriate, right? Because it's the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod. So it's not they picked up 30 million one-ton bags in one prefecture, not the 14 prefectures, which, by the way, were banned. The food was banned for a decade by 55 countries, appropriately, too. All of it. All of Japan should be banned, because the reactors actually melted down, and those emissions have blanketed, particularly the Northern Hemisphere, where the most major fallout originally would have landed. But it covered the whole planet. But that first plume when it came in, and you had no warning for the average person, no concept. Anybody who was in the know was going, shit, the wind blows this way. Oh crap, I got to get duct tape, I got to get electric tape, I got to get plastic, I got to lock this place down. And we got to ride out the first number of plumes coming through. And then the following plumes, like in the ocean,
may be worse than thought. Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German marine research institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
So 6 years, in just 6 years. So they didn't, the ratio that they're using, like the discharge limits, are not the proportion of what you know it's supposed to be. This is their new, where they're going to go take samples. They didn't do it for 13 years almost. We did. Well, we tried to go take samples of the species. You can fill the beach up with Danas, but you can't find the species that are missing. Used to be 7,000 species on these beaches. There's 27,000 islands up there where I'd done the research expeditions for 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year. And the species to your left are exterminated. That's actually exterminated. You'll never take these pictures again. Okay, so we got 3 little videos coming up of the helicopters, and now that we got sound. I didn't know we lost sound earlier. I'm going to monitor the audio with you here. This is reactor 4. Turn it down. That's reactor 4. Now, that helicopter or crane or whatever they're using, I think that's the crane, the water pump with a camera on it. Yeah, that's what that is. If you go near that top of that crane, that's a lethal dose you're exposed to right away. And so they're trying to pretend the fuel pool actually survived, right? And that's what they were up to. And because some of these are fairly long, I'm just going to push through some of it. All of it, rather. It's actually, it'll make some racket because the crane is bumping up against the middle. And next video. Now this one I think is a drone. And these buildings were, those cross members you're going to see to your left. You could typically turn an SUV around on them. They're actually that big. These buildings were meant to take the detonation because they knew this theoretically could happen. But it happened 4 times. And one reactor 2 kind of held up, but they lost the inventory in a China syndrome. But reactor 1, 3, and 4 didn't survive the initial detonation. That's caused by the fuel reactor core melting down. So when the zirconium cladding releases so much hydrogen, because it's burning at around 1800 degrees, that ignites the plutonium and uranium pellets. I'm just going to move through this, because this is drone footage, low quality, but it's an indispensable footage because it allows you to understand just the carnage. The explosion itself was just unbelievable. And so what you're seeing there, because they were defueling the reactor, and they were loading new fuel into it, so the cover wouldn't have been on it. It was sitting loose anyway, see? The cover is also on the stump. You see the stump to the right? I'll zoom over for you here in a second. There is nothing left to reactor 4. See? That stump should have been razzed all the way to the ground. You can see all the guts to your left hanging out, and in the bottom center, or to the right, hanging out. The fuel pools would have been way up here at the very top of that picture. And so the idea was to manipulate you. And that truck, that pump truck, let me go back to that. Hang on. The pump truck, is a cement truck, so it's meant for pumping, sludgy material, not for pumping water. So they must have strapped a hose on it, but there's nothing to fill up. They know the pool is gone. And it's the same thing for the other reactors. This reactor 1, I believe. This is the original first couple of weeks or something, rather, I should say. And we got one more building. Just short video. They're actually spraying in water. Look at this, people walking in. And that blows me away when I seen that today. And they would have died that day. We have reactor 3 right alongside of them. So this must be quite a while later. This must be weeks later. Let's go back. I want to see those people. Just strutting in, looking around. Researchers wouldn't go within 100 miles of it. This was some homeless people. For TEPCO to get photo opportunity. Yeah, just an everyday walking around with nuclear meltdown. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Fukushima ALPS system safety gaining international acceptance. It's November 13, 2022. And green nuclear. See that at the name? Green nuclear. That really bothers me. These people are perpetual liars. When I looked at their site, I realized this was a pro-nuclear lobbying group like Nuclear News and the World Nuclear News site and the World Nuclear Association. These are lobbying groups. Japanese, Chinese, South Korean environment ministers attended. Japanese Minister Ito reaffirms the safety of released water, saying analysts but water samples show levels of tritium. Concentrations are lower than international standards for drinking water. My goodness. They can filter. You can't, the problem is because you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle. How are you going to separate any atoms because they're all the same size, right? That's the first question you got to ask yourself. And so therefore you can't filter this stuff. Another way to think about this is that when you burn gas, oil, and coal, for instance, the emissions is carbon. So you're never going to see a plume that is carbon. It doesn't exist. This is xenon-133, though.
Jet streams are also real, and they take 3 days. Jet stream, it
And so the plume...
Fukushima, so the jet stream filled up, covered the whole ocean in less than 3 days.
I've done that again, did I? Oh, my apologies. The plume, I didn't mean to use that particular clip. The plume covering the planet. This model is only based on, that's March the 4th, right there. But it's looking at xenon-133, right? There's many different models of different isotopes that are accurate. And for instance, the French model of the cesium-137, this model, wherever it lands, is showing, or wherever it's covering, is 1 million to 10 million becquerels per cubic meter of cesium-137. This one is 450,000 becquerels per liter of xenon-133. But the French model is based on 31 days. This model right now is stopping at 15 days. So this is 10 days after all the reactors had blown up. So as you can imagine, this never stopped. This never stopped, right? And so this model has all the isotopes into it, all the curium, americium, cesiums, uraniums. You can't filter something that doesn't exist anymore. Bummer, I know. And so when they invoke the word tritium, that's the equivalent of coming up and say you're at a restaurant and you got your baby, your first baby, and you got him in like a little carry-around luggage container, and you put him on the ground right alongside you where you're dining. And the nuclear scientist comes along, sees the baby, walks over and starts peeing on him. Because, you're just a lowly human. That's how they see you. So when they say tritium, that's what they're doing to you. If they see you with your baby, they're going to come over and pee on the baby or spit on the baby or something. That's what green nuclear does for a living. They spit on you, in your face. But they're cowards. They won't do it to your face. If you turn your back, they'll come over and pee on your baby. But if you're looking, there's no way they're going to do that. These are cowards, right? You're going boo to them. They defecate in their pants right away. According to Green Nuclear, an organization promoting sustainable and green energy that has been monitoring the latest developments regarding the Fukushima treated water. Imagine if you're trying to monitor the developments, you'd be looking at me, not them. Japanese ongoing diplomatic efforts, and that's terrifying that you got to come here to get the truth. Japan's ongoing diplomatic efforts in tandem with consistently proven test results, the IRI can say, appear to have eased the region's tension with China and South Korea. Because that was artificially inflated. The idea was, if China's in the conversation, Taiwan will never get mentioned, right? But Taiwan, South Korea, China, and Japan are working together, the nuclear industry, to hoodwink the population, in tandem with all the universities and all the medias in those countries. And a little help from Americans, Canadian, New Zealand, Australia, and British medias. Because they're all in, man. They're all in on manipulating you. They don't care about you or anybody else. 2.5 months after Japan began to release the first batch, So they're just releasing anything now? Wait a second. Let me check out the evidence. Well, it looked like that in 2013. So what are you releasing? Everything's already gone. What are you talking about you're releasing? In complying with the standards, the International Atomic Energy Agency is saying that never happened. That's the long and short of it. Data shows the treated water, which is, you can't treat something that doesn't exist anymore. And you can't treat it anyway because the filter is too radioactive. The hoses, the pipes bringing it there are so radioactive you can't step over them. The tanks are so radioactive you can't build any more tanks on the site once you fill up one. Data shows the treated water radioactivity level is considerably lower than that of multiple countries discharging contaminated or treated water. So they're saying that the water from the nuclear meltdown is less radioactive than the water from no nuclear meltdowns. And so I disrespect you from saying that. The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that tritium levels were far below operational limits. International Atomic Energy Agency on November 2nd, 2023 confirmed that nothing got out of these buildings. Despite the fact everything got out of the buildings. Typical officials this 2013, typical officials cannot estimate how frequent water will be discharged from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disease factory. For the next month, the radiation levels of stored water will be tested. The groundwater contains less than 1 becquerel per liter of cesium-134 and cesium-137, 1 becquerel per liter, and 5 becquerels per liter of beta-emitting, and 1,500 becquerels of tritium. But the 5 becquerels of betas will actually drown out the 1,500 becquerels of tritium signal. You won't be able to read the tritium because you have 5 becquerels of beta emitters there. But only 1 becquerel of cesium, 134 and 137 each. July 29, 2013, TEPCO is still struggling to keep their head above the contaminated water. That's 2013, folks. July 29th. This story was 2013. And this one's 2013. TEPCO is still struggling to keep their heads above the contaminated water. The laboratory tests have shown that over 8.7 million becquerels of tritium, 8.7 million, 2.35 billion becquerels of cesium, 750 million becquerels of other radioactive material, really, that's pretty convenient, were present in each liter of the contaminated water. But that's what's being released. Site visit at the K4 tanks area. Site visit to Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Station with International Atomic Energy Agency Task Force to conduct a review mission regarding discharge of the ALPs treated water. So they're saying nothing happened. Nothing has ever got out, and only what they released is the only thing that got out. Rafael Grossi and the rest of these sadistic, demonic, twisted monsters. The transfer, this is where they mix the water, they say, right? Everybody got your paper mask on? Check. Let's roll. It'd be best to elect a worm than any of these people to do that job. The worm knows the difference between soil. So, we have this incredible amount, unbelievable, inconceivable, unassailable amount of documentation that these people are degenerate scum. That they're hoodwinking you every friggin' facet. At least the third release initiation, which was that one I just showed you, which doesn't make any sense at all, did it? Let me go back to that. The transfer facility. Oh, I saw, yeah, look, yeah, it goes out in the water, ends up in the ocean. Is it cocktail time now? Can we all go get cocktails? Since the discharge began, safety is promoted by the International Atomic Energy Agency. The safety of the process promoted by the International Atomic Energy Agency, who unequivocally says that, yeah, that was reactor 3 and reactor 4 for the last 12 years, but not anymore. That actually never happened. Right? For the last 12 years, they're like, holy shit, it melted down. Now they're like, meltdown? What meltdown? Ha ha. Since the discharge began. Well, it never stopped. Right? Everything is based on a lie, and the problem is you got to keep telling a bigger lie each time. And they got a public relation firm that thinks they got it all figured out, and apparently they do, because everybody else is out there screeching about tritium. But we can't keep doing that. We can't have a future. They're not pretending they're in melted reactors and everything is normal because they're bored or because it's harmless. October 29th, the G7 industrial powers call for an end to the ban on seafood from a nuclear wasteland. So, the idea is promote the tritium rather than what really happened. And the food was banned by all the G7 nations for a decade that are now saying everything is safe. Obviously, it can't be safe. You didn't ban the food in 14 prefectures because Fukushima was safe. You're still surrounded by abandoned ghost towns where you can't go, but the water is less radiation than other reactors worldwide. Let me get after it here. Let's go to tanks. So Mari Yamaguchi, who's the cover story with the Associated Press, obviously for Japan. Tanks at the crowd. This is 2013. They had 1,000 tanks. 2013. 2014, Mari Yamaguchi again, 1,200 tanks. In 2017, they had 900 tanks. And try walking with both of your feet flat on the ground, see how that works for you. Notice you're standing on steel plates. That's important. Fukushima will have to dump radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean. In 2019, they had on this line right here at the beginning over there, 1,000 tanks. 2021, you guessed it, 1,000 tanks. 2023, that's Mary Yamaguchi, by the way. 2023, accumulated in 1,000 tanks at the plant. So they had 1,000 tanks in 2013, 1,000 tanks in 2023. How many tanks did he build in the last decade? Flowing from the upper stream storage to downstream storage, commencement of discharge. This is the official. It's perpetual. It's going out in the ocean because the buildings are destroyed. You can't contain it. 2023, rather, this one, Mary Yamaguchi. AP gets a rare look at Japan. Fukushima nuclear plant is prepared to release the radioactive water. Mary Yamaguchi again, with that same cover story. That's the pump house, stored in 8,000 tanks. So the Arriva system, which is the filtration system, which is the ALP system, 2014 in August, has still been unused and kept out of operation. Which is the French system, rather. 2014, 3 years. The other one was the French was 3.5 years later. The same thing. The Japanese system, 2014, has yet to function reliably. In other words, hasn't been used. And the problem with it was they actually tried to use it apparently, and you couldn't get near it again. Its goal is now there will not be realized with dealing with the water of 2015 because they still can't do it. There's parts of the plant where they don't even have control. The groundwater bypass operation in 2014 had no effect. They're going to install a fence for $1 billion. That didn't happen because you can't build a fence. You're talking about physical atoms. You can't build a fence. That's not going to work. Why would you build an ice wall? Because it was experimental, so the government paid for it, the taxpayer paid for it. But it can't work. You're going to spend $9 million a year to try to do maintenance on it. But the problem is radiation gets up against the wall. You can't get near the wall because it's reflecting neutrons. So you can have a chain reaction, will melt through the wall because it's ice. So it's literally stupid on a whole different level. It's got no top, got no bottom. There's no way to contain it. So the Curium and the Surrey system, they stopped mentioning that in 2013. Yeah. And they also admitted the plant was releasing enormous amounts of highly contaminated water directly into the ocean, hemorrhaging from a plethora of places from the reactor buildings. And as you know, the reactor buildings were severely... Oh, that's the wrong picture. The reactor buildings were severely destroyed. They were gone. Not destroyed, but gone. They were completely evaporated. The reactor 3 ejected the reactor core and the fuel pools, 2 of them, right out of the building at high speeds. And so they censored me pretty good last night. We had 86 views, was it? And when the show was over, it only gave me 21 views. The show before that, they only gave me 11 views. I've only been doing it for a decade, so you got to punch in the time, I guess, right? No, it's censorship. They don't want you knowing this. They don't want you seeing this. They don't want you understanding any of this. This is the opposite of what they told you. They show you none of these facts, right? Let me see what I got done here. Yeah, let's look at that right quick. So when the show was over, I had 21 views last night. I had 21 views, 41 thumbs up. So I had twice as many thumbs up as I had views. But I actually had 85 views. But in order to keep my numbers low, what they're doing now is they're just random numbers, 10, 15, 20. And there's the most, it's a hugely important issue. The lobbying groups, the corporations, have taken over all the social media networking. And they only let me here so they can keep an eye on me, right? That's all they're worried about. Keep an eye on him. We got to let him go somewhere because he's going to go somewhere. And they can control a lot of people's searches, right? And I don't show up in them, obviously. You don't want nuclear students watching me because they're never coming back. Or they're never going to go nuclear, right? What do I got down here? I'll figure it out in a second. That's what I done wrong. I had that window was up. I forgot about it. It was Japan's ALP water filtration system meant to fool us into complacency to hide the Fukushima dangers. We got 15 viewers. I would like to thank Stephen Young and his lovely for donating $50 on the weekend. I forgot to mention that. Thank you, Stephen. I know I've seen some of your comments there earlier. We're going to end the poll here, and we'll call it a night. And so if anybody really wants to learn about the ALP system, this is the best video you're ever going to come across because you'll actually learn the terrifying truth. But at least now you can make plans based on facts instead of dangerous deceptions, deadly deceptions. It's outrageous that there's nobody's going after these people. There's no administrations, no justice, no prosecutors, no police. They won't look. They're like, oh, well, it's nuclear. We got no jurisdiction. Because only the regulatory agencies can make it illegal to poison you. It's not illegal to poison you, see? It's not illegal to poison you. That's not terrifying. What the hell is? Let me go back over to the other pane because this pane, I'll have to remember to try to check into that. The audio is gone on this window, so I might have to start a new session tomorrow. That takes several hours for me to move everything over to a different session so we can pick up and I can have everything at my fingertips. It's very complicated. Or I can just move everything over to that other window, which is still a nightmare, but hey, at least it works. And I can't resolve the audio. And we'll see everybody tomorrow night. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. I didn't get to work on the vehicle for the last 2 days because it's been unbelievable windy and rainy. Unbelievable amount of wind. And I just don't have the push into me to go and beat the shit out of myself in the rain. Hugs for everybody. See everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night. And a great day tomorrow. Hugs for everybody.